Most people look at a house and see four walls, a roof, and a mortgage. But a real estate investor looks at that same house and sees something completely different. They see a machine that can collect rent, grow in value, pay down debt, and potentially reduce your tax bill, all at the same time. And that is why some people spend 30 years paying for houses, while others use those same houses to build millions in wealth. Today, I'm breaking down the four money-making engines hiding inside real estate, how they work together, and how ordinary people can use them to build serious wealth over time. And no, this isn't a video about flipping houses, getting rich overnight, or buying the biggest house you can possibly afford. We're talking about the actual math. Because once you understand what is happening underneath the surface, real estate starts to look a lot less like a house and a lot more like a wealth-building machine. So stick with me, because by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly how real estate creates millionaires and how you could potentially use the same system yourself. And if you like Money Explained without the financial fairy dust, subscribe to Monty. We break down the numbers behind how wealth actually works. Let's start with the most obvious one, the one everyone talks about, but most people still get wrong. Rental income. When you own a property and rent it out to a tenant, you collect money every single month. Sounds simple, right? But here is where beginners make the critical mistake. They confuse revenue with profit. Your rental income is not your cash flow. Cash flow is what remains after you subtract every single expense: your mortgage payment, property taxes, insurance, maintenance costs, property management fees, and a reserve fund for unexpected repairs. The money left over after all of that is your actual profit. And even if that number seems small at first, say a couple $100s per month per property, this is the foundation everything else gets built on. Because that cash flow is what allows you to hold a property long enough for all the other wealth generators to kick in. But here's where real estate gets interesting. That couple $100s a month isn't even the main event. Because while your property is generating cash flow, something else is happening in the background. That brings us to the second way real estate builds wealth, which most people dramatically underestimate: appreciation. Over time, property values tend to rise. Cities expand, populations grow, infrastructure improves, and demand for land generally outpaces supply in desirable areas. Now, this is not a guarantee on any single year. Markets do go through rough patches and downturns. But historically, over longer holding periods, real estate values have climbed significantly. And here is the part that makes this powerful. You do not just benefit from appreciation on the money you put in. You benefit on the entire value of the property, including the portion you borrowed from the bank. So if you put down 20% on a property and the whole thing appreciates, you are gaining wealth on 100% of that asset, while only having invested 20%. That is the power of leverage, and it is the reason real estate can build wealth faster than almost any other investment class when used correctly. And if you think that's powerful, there's another number moving in the opposite direction every single month. The third wealth engine: loan paydown. Every single month when your tenant pays rent, a portion of that mortgage payment chips away at the loan balance you owe the bank. This is called loan paydown, or equity build-up. And here is the beautiful part. You are not paying that loan down with your own money. Your tenant is paying it down for you through their rent payments. So while you sleep, your debt is shrinking, and your ownership stake in that property is growing. Over years, this process accelerates. Early mortgage payments are weighted toward interest, but over time, more and more of each payment goes directly toward reducing the principal. By the time you have owned a property for a decade or two, the gap between what the property is worth and what you owe has grown dramatically. That gap is equity, and equity is real, accessible wealth. So at this point, you've got three separate engines working on the same property. But there's one more that most people completely overlook, and this one happens on paper. The fourth wealth generator that very few people in casual conversation ever bring up, and it is one of the most powerful tools available to real estate investors. Tax advantages. Real estate investors receive treatment from the tax code that is genuinely different from almost any other income source. Rental income can often be offset by something called depreciation, where the government allows you to deduct a portion of the building's value each year as a paper expense, even if the property is actually going up in value. This can dramatically reduce the taxable income you report. And when you eventually sell a property, there are strategies available that can defer capital gains taxes. Someone earning the same dollar amount from a salary versus from real estate investment can end up keeping a very different amount of money when all is said and done. Always consult a qualified tax professional for your specific situation. But understand that the tax structure around real estate is a real and significant advantage. Let's stop talking about theory and put one property on the operating table. You buy a $200,000 property with $40,000 down and a $160,000 mortgage. Now watch what happens. The property generates $2,400 in annual cash flow. The tenant helps pay down several $1,000s of your mortgage. The property appreciates by roughly $6,000 at a 3% annual rate. And potentially, the tax benefits reduce your taxable income. You didn't magically create $10,000 by writing yourself a $10,000 check. 4 different mechanisms were quietly working on the same $200,000 asset. Think of it like this. 1 property, 4 engines. Cash flow puts money in your pocket. Appreciation increases the value of the asset. Loan paydown increases your ownership. And tax advantages can improve the after-tax result. That's why looking at rental income alone completely misses the point. Let us talk about how you actually scale this into millions. The key concept is that real estate is a compounding game. You start with 1 property. The cash flow it generates, combined with the equity you build over time, can help you fund the next purchase. That 2nd property generates its own cash flow and equity, which helps you move toward a 3rd. Refinancing is another powerful tool here. When a property appreciates significantly, you can take out a new, larger loan against it, pull out some of that built-up equity as cash, and deploy it into another investment without selling the original asset. You keep the property, keep the cash flow, and use the freed capital to grow. So if you're sitting there thinking, okay, Monty, sounds great, but how does an actual beginner get into this? The first problem, the down payment. Saving up is one route, but there are also strategies like house hacking, where you live in one unit of a small multifamily property while renting out the others, and the rental income from your tenants essentially covers your mortgage. That is a legitimate way to get into the game with far less capital tied up. Second problem, what happens when the market crashes? This is exactly why cash flow matters so much. If your property generates positive monthly income, a market downturn does not force you to sell at a loss. You can hold it, keep collecting rent, and wait for values to recover. The people who lose in downturns are typically those who over-leveraged and had no cash flow buffer to sustain them through rough periods. Third problem, I don't want to become a full-time landlord. You do not have to do it yourself. Professional property managers exist specifically for this purpose. Yes, they take a percentage of the rent, and yes, you need to factor that into your expense calculations. But for many investors, outsourcing the day-to-day management is what makes owning multiple properties actually viable. But here's where I want to put the brakes on for a second, because this is also where real estate content online can get dangerous. People show you the property that doubled in value. They show you the rent check. They show you the equity. What they don't show you are the vacancies, broken furnaces, insurance increases, property taxes, bad tenants, unexpected repairs, and years when the property barely moves. The 4 engines are powerful, but they don't make a bad deal good. The deal still has to make sense on day 1. And honestly, that's not a reason to be discouraged. It's the reason to get educated. Because once you understand the numbers, you stop looking at real estate as a lottery ticket and start looking at it as a business. You can calculate the cash flow. You can stress test the deal against higher expenses. You can build reserves for the things that inevitably go wrong. You can use conservative assumptions instead of betting everything on prices going up. And you can walk away when the numbers don't work. That's the real advantage of understanding the system. You don't need every property to be a home run. You need to understand the math well enough to avoid the disasters, recognize the good opportunities, and give the right investments enough time to compound. And that's really the lesson behind all four engines. Real estate isn't magic. It's a collection of small financial advantages working together over a very long period of time. Cash flow puts money in your pocket. Appreciation can increase the value of the asset. Loan paydown increases your ownership. Tax advantages can improve the after-tax result. And when you combine those engines with patience, responsible leverage, and consistent reinvestment, something remarkable can happen. One property can become two. Two can become three. And eventually, the assets you bought years ago can start creating opportunities you couldn't have afforded at the beginning. That's how serious wealth is built. Not through one lucky deal, not through a get-rich-quick scheme, but by understanding the system, making good decisions, and letting time do the heavy lifting. So if you've been looking at real estate thinking, I could never build a $1 million portfolio, remember this. You don't build the $1 million portfolio today. You build the first property. Then you learn. Then you build the next one. And you let the math compound from there. If this video helped you see real estate differently, hit that like button. It helps more people find the numbers behind the hype. And subscribe to Monty if you want more videos that break down how wealth actually works without the rosy version. And tell me in the comments, which of the four engines surprised you the most? Cash flow, appreciation, loan paydown, or tax advantages? Because around here, we don't just talk about getting rich, we break down the math. I'll see you in the next one.